Welcome to the Fall 2013 Skunk Works debate. My name is Adam Scott Wandt, Chair and Senior Researcher with the CUNY Skunk Works, and Assistant Professor and Faculty Fellow for Online Learning at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. We're here today with a panel of staff members, administrators, and faculty members from around CUNY. We'll start with Joseph Ugoretz, Associate Dean at Macaulay's Honor College, to my direct left. To his left, we have Dr. Leroy Lawton, Deputy Chief Librarian at Bronx Community College. And to his left, we have Dr. Nicole Elias, Assistant Professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. This debate and panel comes in a time of need where we discuss both the ethics and use of academic integrity software like Turnitin.com and SafeAssign. Since there are many questions in the academic community as to the ethics and use of this software, the Skunk Works Academic Technology Research and Development Group has put together a short videoed debate that we will release as a podcast so that we could better explore issues involving using academic integrity software. So let me start off with giving each one of the speakers about 5 minutes, although shorter is fine. And we'll start with Dr. Joseph Ugoretz.
Thank you, Adam. So I come to the practice of so-called academic integrity software from my perspective of 20 years as a writing teacher at Borough of Manhattan Community College. Before I was an administrator at Macualay Honors College, I was an English teacher, both at BMCC and before that at the high school level. So my orientation, my concern is that students learn to be better writers in all contexts and for all purposes. My position on Turnitin and similar kinds of software is that it's destructive of those ends, that this is a way to train students that they should be assumed to be villains, assumed to be rule breakers, assumed to be criminals. It does not put the appropriate responsibility or ownership of their own work. It treats them as if they're always going to do something wrong. In addition, the softwares take away some of the most important functions of a teacher in teaching writing. They take away the teacher's engagement with the student writing and being aware of who's saying what and how they're saying it. And they take away the need for teachers to have creative, individualized, and constantly changing assignments. The use of the software tends to make it too easy to rely on a large class and a small amount of change and individualization in that class. In short, I kind of see these platforms as an attempt at a technological solution to a pedagogical problem. And that's always doomed to failure in my eyes. You need to address the pedagogical issues in terms of helping teachers to help students to understand what original writing means, what academic integrity means, and what research means and crediting sources. Those are all teaching tasks, and they're best fulfilled by a teacher working with students to do better on their work rather than catching the criminals and punishing them. I always feel that productive, constructive work is better than enforcement and punishment.
Thank you. Next, we'll have an opening by Dr. Leroy M. Lawton, Deputy Chief Librarian at Bronx Community College.
Hi, and thank you. I would have to concur with my colleague here in the sense that my experience with Turnitin, we up at Bronx Community College had purchased this particular software at the behest of a number of departments across the curriculum. And one of the first things that I had trouble with was the fact that many of our students, while a vast majority of them were, what you might say, caught up in the web of plagiarizing a particular work, did not understand the concept about how to do what we would call appropriate research. And here is where the library felt constrained to attempt to embed information literacy, embed basically how to avoid pitfalls by using this particular type of software across the curriculum. Be that as it may, we found ourselves in a conundrum in the sense that while many faculty were very much involved in getting us to purchase this particular item, we found that many of our students were being put at a disadvantage. That disadvantage was this: they would get caught, they would have a conversation with the instructor, but of course if an instructor has, say, anywhere between 30 to 40 students in the classroom, how does that student get to actually improve on their writing skills? Okay, how do they understand the concept of what is called appropriate research? And we found that more often than not, many of our students were lacking in this very basic skill. So it was one thing to tell a student, well, go to the writing center, someone in the writing center will assist you. And my argument there was, rather than spend 30, 40,000, whatever the operating license is for this, why couldn't we infuse that money into, say, hiring more teaching fellows who could actually work one-on-one with our students so that they could actually understand the reasoning behind doing what we call appropriate research, making the appropriate citations, making sure that their paper was basically on point. This technology, like a lot of the other technology that's out there today, is invasive in the sense that what is teaching many of our college students here today is that you can get the quick and easy. Okay, you can get the quick and easy. You can go out on the internet. You can download whatever. If you take a look at music, music today, sometimes when I'm listening to music, I will say to myself, dang, you know what, that beat sounds very, very familiar. And sure enough, it is. Why? Because this artist has copied this beat from another artist. But you don't see them screaming and going off the deep end on this. Why? Because money's being made on both ends. So I have to ask myself, who profits here in terms of the use of Turnitin, and does the student actually walk away learning something? Now, Turnitin has recently come up with a lot of innovative ways in which you can, students can now look at each other's papers, they can critique it. They've got all of these whistles and bells in there that look attractive. But my argument is, what documentation indicates to me, both as a non-teaching faculty member up at Bronx Community College and a teaching faculty member out at Queens College, what documentation indicates to me that this is viable and that it works? And right now, I don't see those figures.
Thank you, Dr. Lawton. I should point out that there is a live audience, and this is being streamed live over YouTube. And if anyone has any questions in the live audience, please ask a question at any time, either in the comments or the chat section, and we will get it to one of our speakers. Next, we have Dr. Nicole Elias, Assistant Professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, who teaches primarily in the Master of Public Administration program.
Thanks, Adam. This is my first semester here at John Jay, and it's also my first semester using Turnitin. In the past, I have used no plagiarism detection software, and I've used SafeAssign. I have to say that my experience thus far with Turnitin has been overwhelmingly positive. I think from a very pragmatic position in terms of class management, Turnitin does a very good job of providing an interactive component to student-instructor feedback. And it's also very transparent. So there's no question of the dog ate my homework, or I really did submit it 5 minutes prior to the deadline or anything like that. Thinking from more of an ethical lens, I think the benefit of Turnitin that I compare to the past when I've used either no plagiarism detection software or when I've used SafeAssign, Turnitin really treats each student in the same way. So instead of me taking my own assumptions and biases surrounding student work or engagement in the classroom that I have towards a particular student's work that I'm looking at, and then plugging in a sentence or a paragraph into Google, Turnitin does that for me across the board evenly. So I'm not giving any one student the benefit of the doubt over another, or assuming that a student, because of their comments in class, can write up to a certain caliber while others may not be able to do that in written work. So I think from a checking standpoint and a uniformity standpoint, Turnitin creates a less biased system and does not allow the instructors maybe inclinations towards certain students and others shine through in the actual assessment of what constitutes students' work. So from both of those very pragmatic and ethical lenses, I think there is a utility for Turnitin. That's not to say that, interaction one-on-one and more resources can be added to strengthen student writing, but as an initial check on the work to diagnose problems, I think Turnitin really provides a strong benefit.
Thank you very much, Dr. Elias. The first question I'm going to ask, I will ask to actually all three of you, and perhaps you could respond in a couple of short minutes. What is the correct balance, if there is any balance, between working with students one-on-one and avoiding using any academic integrity software, and ensuring that students with bad intent don't bring down the quality or value of an academic program? Would one of you like to take it first?
Well, I think that within the context of that question, I think it would depend on class size. I know I've worked with instructors who have had large groups of students to work with. And from that point of view, I think that Turnitin and other software applications that are out there like SafeAssign, this is a first line of defense in terms of checking against plagiarism. One of the things that I've always enjoyed about working one-on-one with students is that there is this connect. But of course, if you've got 40 students, 60 students, sometimes even 110 students in a class, how can you possibly be able to actually sit down and go through that entire process? So, it begs the question, is this the road that we're going to? Anyone who's graduated from Baruch College will tell you most of their classes, and I'm almost sure they're here even at John Jay, most of their classes 65 and above in terms of students, in terms of the number of students that are in the class. So, okay, fine, you may have a teaching assistant or assistant rather, or a teaching fellow in the classroom, or a group of them working with students within a particular group, but the object sublime here is to improve student writing, so that when they get to that graduate level, you're not running into the kinds of problems that we're seeing, say, for example, on the undergraduate level and even on the community college level. From my own personal perspective, I think it's extremely difficult. There has to be a balance, but with the technology that's out here today, with the way higher education is going, with the way publishers are going in terms of what they're offering in terms of textbook content and everything that's now all of a sudden embedded into everything. For those of us who are in higher ed, these are going to be some very, very interesting times, because this changes the entire pedagogical landscape.
Thank you.
I would say that in striking the balance, Turnitin really serves as a great diagnostic tool. So understanding that a student has, either for ill or good intent, either struggled with proper citation or attempted to pass some work off as their own when maybe that's not the case, Turnitin really can identify that issue that is taking place. Now, where Turnitin falls short is deciding how to proceed in evaluating the student's intent. So the way that I've used Turnitin this semester is really to understand that there's an issue going on and then speak one-on-one with students and figure out how to proceed from there based on what I can assess as the student's motivation or lack of understanding in certain cases. But I don't think Turnitin can rightfully serve as the final decision maker in such a case. So there needs to be, as you said, a balance between the interpersonal and then the use of the technology too.
Thank you.
I'll confirm what my colleagues have said. I agree very much. And I'll add something else to the subject of students with ill intent, because of course they do exist, and it would be naive to think that they don't. Wherever you have assignments, you're going to have people who want to cheat on those assignments. But, you know, it's kind of a trite overused saying, but those who cheat on those assignments, it's worth asking who they're really cheating, and whether there is a real detriment to the value of the degree or the experience of any other students if a student cheats on an assignment. My position has always been that those students mainly are cheating themselves, and I think that's a pretty easy argument to support. I think that if we get caught up in the idea of, you know, enforcing the integrity of the assignment rather than the idea of working with the student, we can lose sight of who's really supposed to be the object of what we're doing. And for those students who have not ill intent, for those who just have a misunderstanding of how to cite sources or not really aware of how much to quote and how much to paraphrase, for example, those are real questions that need to be addressed that become evident almost immediately, even without the use of any such software. So I think you can handle the cases of the students who have good intent but are mistaken, and those who have ill intent, the software may catch them, it may not. Turnitin has a pretty large number of false negatives and false positives, and it's pretty easy to cheat Turnitin if you're really committed to cheating. So we're always going to have sinners amongst us, but I think the real purpose has to be to look as teachers at who needs help and then to give them that help.
Thank you. This next question is for Dr. Nicole Elias. How in the past have you used plagiarism checking software in your prior semester to work within the classroom and manage and improve student work?
I think that one of the real benefits and the way that I've utilized these softwares in the past has been to direct student progress. So the way that SafeAssign or Turnitin is set up, you can create different iterations of a specific assignment. And if we're working through 3 drafts, for example, a student can track the comments that I've made in draft 1 and 2 before submitting draft 3. In that case, I can also go back when I'm grading draft 3 and take a look at what I've suggested to do in draft 1 and 2 and see if there's substantive improvement for draft 3. I think that the assumption that these tools are only or should only be treated as plagiarism detection devices is limited. I think there's a lot of positive benefit that we could really focus on if we treat it as a tool to guide that student engagement and to improve student work in a much more positive sense.
Thank you. Dr. Ugoretz, being that there are some positive uses of this software, being that faculty members do use this positively, not just negatively, are there any good or appropriate uses of Turnitin, SafeAssign, or other academic integrity software that you could see?
Thank you. That's a question I was hoping to get, because I think, as Nicole has pointed out, it's really important to see that there's advantages to using any kind of electronic submission and tracking system. You mentioned the timestamp of assignments, or being able to see prior comments on prior versions. And I think those are absolute advantages, and if one is using Turnitin or a similar platform for those purposes, I would support that 100%. I do think, though, that those purposes exist in many other tools. There's many ways to have assignments turned in electronically with timestamps, to have the comments tracked, to have students see and comment on each other's work, as Leroy mentioned. Those are all kind of standard digital writing tools or advantages that I think we should all be using, and they're really good to use. And you don't need the plagiarism detection element as part of the suite. Turnitin adds that element, which I don't feel is necessary. If you were to use Turnitin without using that segment, I'd say that's a great use of the tool. In addition, I think there is an appropriate use even for that so-called plagiarism detection segment, and that is if the student herself gets the report rather than the teacher getting the report. I think as an initial draft, for a student to submit the draft and then see the report and then go over that with the teacher, as Nicole mentioned, that's a really powerful kind of experience. But that really rests on the report going first to the student to take responsibility for correcting any problems that the report detects. I do notice that Turnitin offers this service to students, even if the institution doesn't have a contract. Charge starts at, I think it was $7.95 per paper, so it's a little hefty to be asking students to pay that. I think we'd probably be better off if the institution made the contract and, in the interest of improving student writing, allowed students access to the tool and the reports so that they could then take that report to their teacher, to a writing fellow, to the writing center, wherever it's necessary to make the improvements that the report identifies, or to reject those improvements if, as is frequently the case, they're false positives or bad advice.
Thank you.
I would reiterate and comment that on CUNY's website, there is what is called an academic integrity statement. Every campus also has one regarding academic integrity, specifically for students who are caught cheating and the whole 9 yards. A vast majority of students, though, are completely unaware of this, and if they do read over it, they just basically gloss over it. At the same time, though, when you think about these types of software applications that we're currently using, there is both there's both a pro and con on them, and I think that one of the things that needs to be done is that CUNY administration need to take a look at this particular software, whether it's Turnitin or SafeAssign, and they need to be speaking to faculty members who are pushing for this and sitting down and talking and asking them, well, how can this both benefit not only us as instructors, but also the student, in the sense that it will improve their writing. It will improve their doing citations is really, citations is not the issue. I think it is the content that has got faculty and students up in arms already, because if they take a statement and they don't cite it correctly, right away there's this big issue. So the question becomes, well, now how do I improve on this? How do we make our students aware? You can talk to them, until the cows come home. The bottom line is, if it's not quick and dirty, they're not going to listen. They're not. For me to submit a paper into Turnitin.com and then come back and then have my instructor talk to me and say, well, I'm not sure where you got this one, where you got this information from, but according to the software, this information came from here, and then I go back and I sit down and I say, but that's not where I got that from because I have the document right here. From my own personal perspective, using it for the first time could be very, very confusing. From a community college point of view, these are the types of issues that we run into when it comes to not only our students coming into library questioning about how to use Turnitin, but also faculty members who have, it's their first time using this particular, this particular software. So a whole training session has to be implemented throughout every semester, and even that has issues. But I think that there has to be some kind of balance where we can bring Turnitin to the table, or SafeAssign, whatever the software application might be, and sit down and hash out the pros and cons.
Thank you. So there are two issues I want to explore in more depth, and let's do so one at a time, and each person could respond to each issue. The first issue involves intellectual property and the intellectual property of the papers being uploaded. And the second issue, I would like to explore more the idea that certain students do not mind committing academic integrity fraud to get their degree, and how that affects a program in general. But let's start with the intellectual property issue. One of the critiques that I've heard many times about Turnitin.com is students that upload their papers to Turnitin.com have very little choice themselves as to whether or not that paper ends up in a database and how that database is used going forward. Dean Ugoretz, would you like to respond a little bit about how you feel about the intellectual property issue?
Yeah, thank you, Adam. I had IP on my notes here and circled, so I'm glad you brought that up. It's a point that I really feel is important to address. As you said, when a student uploads a paper to Turnitin, that paper then becomes part of Turnitin's database for detecting plagiarism and detecting other people who may have copied that student's paper. That's a use of the student's work that the student may not understand, even if he or she has agreed to it by accepting the terms of use, or the college has accepted it. It's something that the student may not have given much thought. And just, beyond the legal grounds, I think legally it's been decided that Turnitin does have the legal right to make a profit off students' work in this way. That's the law. Ethically speaking, I feel that it detracts from the kind of attitude towards work that we want students to have. I want students to feel proud of their own work, to feel that it's something that they created out of their own, effort and creativity, and the idea that someone else can then take it without their express permission and make a profit from it means that they no longer have that kind of engagement with the ownership of their work. And I feel, especially for weaker students, it's a very difficult concept to get across, that they should be writing, they should be working on school assignments, not just as a way to fulfill a requirement, right, but as something that really matters to them and that is part of their own learning process. We struggle daily to help them to have that attitude. And if we then turn around and say, well, we want you to have that attitude, we want you to have ownership of your work, but it's okay if Turnitin sells access to it, we're not going to question them on that. We're sort of speaking out of both sides of our mouth, and I feel uncomfortable with that.
Dr. Lawton, do you have anything to add on that?
I would have to agree with that. Just recently, one of my former graduate students came across a paper, a research paper that he had submitted that another student apparently paraphrased and turned it and caught it. And his argument was that while he hit the click button and agreed to the terms of letting Turnitin use his paper going forward, he told me point blank that he felt somewhat violated because he said this was part of his thesis that he had submitted, And here it was, Turnitin was actually using his, and I'm almost sure a number of other people's research that had been downloaded into the software application, and he was just wondering where does this end and where does it start and where does it end in terms of having his work in a for-profit company that, for the most part, is making a killing off of his writing.
Before we move on, I want to play devil's advocate for a moment. And I'm going to play it on two issues with this intellectual property area. The first retort, Dr. Lawton, wasn't Turnitin in that case protecting your student?
Yes, it was.
Because his work was being used illegally by another.
Absolutely, and I did point that out to him, but at the very, very same time, his argument to me was, yes, good, and I'm glad the student got caught, because I listen, we do not live in a black and white society, okay? There are a lot of gray areas out there, and if you walk across the street and then the bank is open and there's money sitting up there, sitting right out there at the front door, invariably somebody's going to go over and take it. That is the bottom line. Okay, that is the nature. That's the nature. Okay. At the same time, though, this was the first time that he became aware, okay, that his work, okay, that he spent 2.5 years working on, okay, was out there without any kind of pro quid pro on his aspect. Okay. And so from that perspective, he said, on the one hand, okay, fine, I'm glad that it caught this student and who else ever attempting to sign off on something that clearly was not theirs, but at the same time, though, he said he felt violated.
One of the things I've been doing with my graduate students for quite some time is instructing them to build a website as part of one of my classes. The website houses the research that they do in the course, and then the website makes the research publicly available to other researchers, other academics who want to get hold of that research. And in the course that I teach, what the students are doing are using either their own website or publicly available websites to build web creation websites, I guess I should call them, to build websites to host their research. But inevitably, everything we put online today is indexed by search engines such as Google and Yahoo,
Right.
who exist to do solely nothing more than to sell the information that they collect. How is Turnitin.com different than Google? And how is a faculty member forcing their student to upload their paper to Turnitin.com any different than me forcing my students to create a publicly available website to house their research? Am I doing something inherently wrong?
I don't know that I would go so far as to chide you, Adam, but I will say that, as I said before, that the attitude, the ultimate goal we're trying to accomplish here is to have students take ownership of their own work and to feel that it's something that they are in control of. So I really think that the choice of whether to make one's research public should be an informed and intentional choice. Students should absolutely be encouraged to do so. I'm all in favor of open access to all kinds of knowledge, but that ultimately has to be the decision of the student involved, so that if a student in your class says, gee, I understand your reasons for having me post my research publicly, but I'm not comfortable with it and I want to keep it private and not indexed by search engines and not available to the public, that should be the student's right to opt out of that requirement.
How many faculty members today use tools like Facebook groups, Second Life, web conferencing software, and even Blackboard.
Yeah.
Even Blackboard. And how far are we willing to go in saying to a student that they shouldn't use a technology because they're comfortable or not comfortable with it? For example, if I had a student who was uncomfortable going into Blackboard, even though Blackboard's pretty secure, the student's uncomfortable writing maybe an assignment over Blackboard, they're uncomfortable using the internet in general. How far do we go to accommodate students? On the other side, how far do we go to encourage students to use these technologies? And at times, do they need a push?
Yeah, I think, I don't know that there's a slippery slope there. I think the objective is education. So the ideal should be to tell students clearly what the options are and what the risks are, and let them think it through. The different, it should be a required subject that every student understand the different varieties of Creative Commons licensing, that every student understand which platforms are public and which are private, and that they have the right to make that decision. I probably misspoke before when I used the word comfortable, because that sounds like it's minimizing something and putting it just in the realm of a feeling. I think that there are strong ethical positions involved, and that it's not something that we can just dismiss without actually exploring all of the options. And, I'm not also saying that students should have the right to just opt out of any assignment they find displeasing, but the idea of providing some kind of alternative that does not have the same ethical problems, but still accomplishes the same learning goals, is an alternative worth exploring.
Dr. Elias, this question's for you. Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, has very publicly said that the youth of today do not have the same expectation of privacy as the youth of the past. If you look at software like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, we see more and more of today's youth putting their personal information out in the public in a way that would have scared us 20 to 30 years ago. At the same time, we see that the youth of today also have a different view of intellectual property in the way that they're comfortable sharing and even at times stealing digital rights to music and other media. Taking those issues into account, is it possible that students of today don't have the same need for intellectual property sensitivity as students of the past?
I think that all of those issues are really interesting and do pose inherent contradictions in the way we view ourselves, especially in a community of engaged scholarship. So for me, I don't see scholarly activity as quite as individualized as we've been discussing it thus far. I think that to produce scholarship and the goal of scholarship is really to engage with a community of knowers that goes beyond the individual. So I guess I could put myself in this camp and say that, I'd be a little bit more willing to give up my intellectual property rights in the name of producing more open source, open access scholarship, especially if we think to those ultimate goals of what's the point. We don't just want to talk to ourselves, meaning ourselves as individuals or a very close-knit community of scholars within a discipline or even a sub-discipline. So I think the goal really is to open it up. I see that, and I empathize with the dynamic of sort of cheapening the individualized scholarship and the way that Turnitin can lead down that road. However, I think when we understand ourselves as part of a larger community and think towards those end goals of what a degree is supposed to get us, not such a strict one-to-one relationship, but what skill sets, what doors are intended to open. I don't think we can think in those linear one-to-one relationships.
We definitely have to think outside of the box as far as I'm concerned, which is why these kinds of debates, I think, are extremely important and necessary. You have the traditionalist and you have the new, and I think that both of us need to come down and sit at the same table. So, for example, if you take a look at my son, who is an analyst, and his concept of technology is that, okay, technology is here, we need to embrace it, but at the very, very same time, we need to be extremely careful, because with this kind of technology, this can happen. And lo and behold, and last week, Google, Yahoo, a whole bunch of other sites, all of a sudden had their things hacked into. And he looked at me and he said, and this is the kind of openness. This is the kind of openness in which we need to tread extremely careful. Because when you open up Pandora's box, remember what came out of Pandora's box. And he's one of those technocrats who embraces technology, but at the very, very same time, he says we really, really need to be extremely careful how we introduce this kind of technology. So now, with my two grandsons, one who happens to be 4 and the other one happens to be 2, they are so tech savvy with the new Apple Air that it is scary. So now basically what they do now is they get an hour's time, and after that, that's it. He says because he does not want them to become what he calls intellectual drones. He wants them to be able to think creatively, think outside the box, not have to say, well, okay, fine, I need this answer. Well, let's do a Google search. Well, forget Google. You need to sit down and you need to think. Why does 1 and 1 equal 2? Not because Google said so, but because you take a look at the concept. Okay? If you want to sit down and write a paper on the Constitution of the United States, you have to read the Constitution. You have to understand what the founders were, what was their intent. And in order for you to do that, you need to go back to the very beginning. What technology, unfortunately, does is it takes us directly to the answer. Okay? And therein lies our problem. Therein lies our conundrum. So when you take a look at Turnitin, when you take a look at SafeAssign, all of these are very, very good technologies. Okay, but at the very, very same time, we need to be taking a look at it and seeing how it's impacting on me as the instructor. How is it impacting on you, the student? Okay, so that we can both come to this same spot where we both walk away and say, okay, fine, I actually learned something here. Okay, this writing skills is something that not only is a requirement for this course, but we're talking lifelong learning across the curriculum.
Doctor, oh, sorry, you want to
Just
respond?
one more comment. I think what's really critical is that debates like this become part of the educational experience of all students, so that these really important questions are live and real questions for students, not just for us, so that we're not deciding for them all your work should be open or all your work should be closed, that they're aware of what the issues are. And I think it's great for us to talk about it, but these are all questions that students could discuss as well. So that as the sort of surprising new attitudes towards privacy and intellectual property develop, they develop in a way that is thoughtful, that is critical, that allows students to kind of have a comprehensive view of what's going on.
We actually, so we're live streaming this, and we have 2 different pools that questions can come into. One of them is directly over YouTube. The other one's over the Google+. I'm monitoring the YouTube one, and we actually have a question that has come in for Dr. Lawton. Being that you're a librarian, I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit because it's quite long and choppy, but being that you're a librarian, colleges all over the country require students to deposit or submit their theses or dissertations to the library, many of which who make them available online. How do you reconcile libraries making thesis and dissertations available online with Turnitin.com and the way uploaded papers are also made available in different ways?
Well, I think in that particular context, the only way that someone could probably gain access to that is through a login process or through what is called an interlibrary loan process, which is very, very specific. The types of institutions that you're talking about are clearly big colleges and universities out there. I'm not aware of any within, actually I take that back. I think Queens College, they do keep dissertations, and I think some of the other senior colleges do as well. At this particular point in time, I can only say that this is an issue that is extremely difficult for some of us to reconcile with, myself in particular, only because of the fact that, one, these are scholarly materials that are out there, and I am a proponent of open access and institutional repositories, but at the very, very same time, this is going to be a continued debate on both sides of the fence, and right now I'm weighing both ends of this.
Let's see if we have any questions that have come in from the Google room. Any at all? Okay. We have two more that have come in via YouTube. One of them would be a perfect transition question, actually, to the next segment. So before we go to the transition to the next segment, do either one of you want to have any last words or any additional comments having to do with intellectual property? All right. So I actually approached this debate specifically not wanting to talk about any specific incidents of cheating or any scandals that have occurred. My goal was to basically paint with with broad strokes and ignore specifics. However, this question has come in, and it does talk about a specific scandal. So again, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. It says, to the group, my program at Baruch was devastated due to a cheating scandal.
Yes.
My degree for a while felt like it would not be worth a thing. I believe that it's the responsibility of the college and the administration to ensure that students aren't actively cheating. Doesn't Turnitin just make my degree more valuable in the long run? So that question really transitions well into the next segment, which is there are always students who are going to be gaming the system. There are colleges, and again, I don't want to talk about any specifically, but there are colleges throughout the U.S. that have been damaged and even devastated by large mass cheating scandals. Is it our ethical responsibility as faculty or administration or staff to do everything we could to ensure that these scandals don't occur? And is Turnitin a logical step in doing that insurance? So I guess it's a two-part question. Do we have that responsibility? And if we do, is Turnitin a good step in ensuring academic integrity for a program? Dr. Elias, you want to start first?
Sure. I would say yes to a degree for part one. I think that, as we explained earlier, there is a fine line there, or a solid balance to strike. So no, we can't do absolutely everything and anything to ensure 100% of the time that students will not submit any form of ill-intended plagiarism. Should we try our best? Yes, absolutely. And then the second part of the question is Turnitin the vehicle to get us there? As I said early on, I think it is. I think it is a great way to uniformly scan a class and a batch of assignments and identify potential problems. Does it have bugs? Yes. Does it have false positives? Yes. But that's my job as an instructor of a course to weed that out and then address any issues that are in fact legitimate and that do require attention and can cheapen a degree or pose ethical issues for students that are presenting their own work in very strong and positive terms. So from a very pragmatic stance, I think Turnitin is a first step. But as I explained earlier, I do not think it's the end-all, be-all in this process.
Dr. Ugoretz, if one of your honors students leaves Macaulay, gets a prime position at a New York firm, and then is caught committing fraud, how does that affect that firm hiring future students of yours?
If one of our students, I'd like to say it would never happen, but of course, never is a bad word to use. If one of our students, I guess you're saying one of our graduates,
One of your graduates,
was then caught later on committing fraud.
a recent graduate, if a recent graduate was hired by a firm,
Yeah,
and then very quickly it became apparent that that student committed fraud or plagiarism within their work.
at the workplace.
Right, at the workplace.
Then that student should receive whatever penalty is appropriate at the workplace.
Well, it
whether
most
that's
certainly-
dismissal or
It most certainly
worse.
affects the student, but how does that also affect the reputation of Macaulay's Honors College? I guess that's kind of the question.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I'm sensitive to the comment you got from the Baruch student where the value of the degree was diminished. However, that was a unusual case of widespread cheating. I really don't believe that cases of individual misdeeds reflect heavily on the institution. I'm trying to think of the worst evildoer in recent history. I don't.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah. So
Loaded
let's just
statement.
pick a random evildoer. Saddam Hussein, supposedly, let's say he went to CUNY. I don't think he did. But if Saddam Hussein had gone to CUNY and then afterwards became a terrible despot, would we then say, boy, that reflects really poorly on CUNY? I don't think you can. And I think that most people in the workplace and in the world are sensitive enough to understand that there are always going to be bad individuals. And, the fact that Charlie Manson is from California doesn't mean that California is a breeder of serial killers.
All right. We can just go down and get the responses to the same issue.
I would have to say that, yes, I think it's the responsibility of every academic department to have zero tolerance when it comes to academic integrity and cheating in the whole 9 yards. Is Turnitin the one-stop-all? No, it is not. It clearly, as Irene has already pointed out, and my colleague here has already pointed out, there are clearly bugs within it, but like with any software application program, bugs can be worked out. At the very same time, though, I think that using the Baruch situation as a perfect example, when that scandal hit, a relative of mine had just graduated and had been hired by a well-known corporation here in New York City. 2 months after that scandal hit the front pages, all right, they were demoted.
Wow.
And the demotion was based on the integrity implied by the board of directors of that company and its relationship with Baruch. Because the argument, as they had told me, was how could Baruch, a prestigious college such as Baruch, how could they have let something like this on so large a scale hit them? And that basically what it did was it tainted every graduate coming out of the school at that particular point in time. Now, they have since been promoted, and they are even in a higher position to the position that they had prior to their being demoted. But that sent a clear, from my own personal perspective, that sent a very clear message throughout. It should have sent a clear message throughout all of CUNY that you have got to understand that out there in that world out there, there are businesses and corporations looking at us, and they are expecting integrity. They are expecting it, even though they may not be practicing it themselves. Okay, but that is what they were expecting. And this, and when this hit home, it really stuck to me. So I'm saying to myself, well, on the one hand, okay, fine, we do have as a first line of defense this Turnitin and SafeAssign, okay, but is it the only line of defense? I don't think so. But once again, this debate will continue.
Okay, yes. Thank you. Can you hear me now? Teaching in, we're good? Okay. Teaching in the master's program, I really feel a heightened sense of responsibility engaging with some current and future public administrators. And thinking about the way that I structure my courses and the content of those courses, I really believe that the integrity, the ethics, and these sorts of values begin in the classroom and then translate into the workplace. So I do think it's our responsibility to instill this heightened sense of awareness of integrity and personal responsibility for the way that, you know, work should be conducted or work should be produced. I think that, you know, in instances where I've had questionable citations and minor omissions of quotations, things like that, the understanding that I am looking for it, not in a policing way, but in a way that I'm helping you to understand the rules and the structures in place so that you are able then to take that knowledge and make informed decisions about the work you're producing. I think that dynamic really sets the tone for future work, especially in applied professional settings. So I think it's absolutely critical that tools like Turnitin can help us do a better job of this sort of checking and instilling of values as first steps.
So if I could take that that yes/no question a little bit further, I agree with everyone here that it is the responsibility of the university to work towards the highest level of integrity and to help students understand the necessity for that kind of ethical approach to their work. I just don't feel that Turnitin is the solution that works for that. So I guess my answers would be yes and then no. If we could have a software tool that would, with the flick of a switch, prevent everyone from ever doing anything wrong, I'd like to have the patent on that software tool. I don't think that it exists, and Turnitin, I think, is one that, because of all of the negative features that I've described earlier, it's not worthwhile to make the sacrifices to get the small level of prevention that it might provide.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I think that with all of the technology that's out here today, cheating is and can be very, very easy, but I think that one of the issues that always strikes home with me, particularly with the students that I come in contact with, is that they need to understand that when it comes to writing, writing is in many ways an art form, but practice makes perfect, and that while they may get a paperback that's got red marks all over it, that is just the first step in a very, very long journey, and they need to be able to connect the dots between, say, English 11, criminal justice 14, history 20, and they need to understand that while they're writing for these classes individually, collectively speaking, they are writing across the curriculum, and that in and of itself is a process, and that is also a process in which they should be learning. And sometimes there's this disconnect where they actually don't see that. You may see it on the graduate level, and even in, say, a college like John Jay, but on the community college level, where I'm dealing with students who are coming in for the first time, or adults returning back to college, there's this big disconnect, and for them, the writing process can be extremely difficult. And so when you introduce Turnitin to them, that in and of itself is a turnoff. It's like, oh God, now I'm really doomed. And so how do you get that student to understand that this particular software is not so much being used to spank you, so to speak, but to get you into that writing modality where one day you'll be able to sit down and write a coherent paragraph that makes sense to the instructor.
We've had a total so far of 116 people enter the virtual room, and we're starting to get a few more questions now. And I'm going to combine two of the questions to go to our final question, our final point. So what we'll do is we'll ask one more point, and then we'll give you time to wrap up some comments. Two of the guests online have pointed out the fact that it sounds like there's a difference in how Turnitin has value at the community college level versus the senior college level versus graduate programs. How do you see the difference between these programs? That's basically the question, and perhaps if we can give everybody a few minutes to answer that. Just rephrasing a little bit in my own words, are there differences in the way we should be using this at a community college level versus a four-year level versus a master's or doctoral level?
Well, I think from a community college point of view, what I'm seeing is that we're getting a lot of students who are coming in whose writing skills are not what I would say up to speed, and so as a result, they're getting feedback from fellow classmates. Well, you can use this paper or that paper, what have you. That is one particular type of student that I'm seeing. The other type of students that I'm coming in contact with are students whose writing skills are up to par, but they just need assistance in terms of the way they're phrasing their sentences and the whole 9 yards. I sometimes get the impression, though, that instructors are using these software applications to sort of just catch the student out there, just to make sure that they're not cheating or anything like that, and they're moving on to the next level. But that student is not learning anything in terms of how to avoid that process the next time going around. By the time we see them when they come into our library, they've already been graded, or the paper is so mauled that they themselves don't understand the entire process. And so sitting down with them and telling them, listen, this assignment, many of them didn't even read the assignment correctly, okay? And so that in and of itself was an issue. So there is a layer of issues that I think that are completely different from, say, the four-year and the graduate level in terms of its use.
Thank you. Either Dr. Ugoretz or Dr. Elias?
We shouldn't use it at any level.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, that's right.
Well, I can't really speak to the community college level because I have not had experience teaching in that setting. But in terms of a four-year institution and graduate programs, I would say that I've used it in the past at four-year institutions at the undergraduate level to primarily build assignments. So that scaffolding approach I referenced earlier, and iterations of the same project and tracking progress. In that utility, it was very helpful to keep students organized and on track and get them through the basics of the assignment. At the graduate level, I've used it more as a course management tool, and to create greater transparency in my comments and student feedback and draft submissions. I should say that in both contexts, I also use the plagiarism checking tool, and that was particularly useful to me in both environments because I was not familiar with the level of student work and engagement when I came into that setting. As I explained, this is now my 14th week here at John Jay, and in week 2 or 3 when assignments were due, I really wasn't sure what to expect or where students would be in their writing level. And the same was true at undergraduate institutions that I had taught at before.
Any more comments on that issue? All right. We're getting ready to tie things up, and I want to give each speaker some time for a couple of last words. In your last words, perhaps one of the things you might want to discuss is whether or not you believe that this is a software that the university should be investing in to make available to professors. So, should professors have this tool available to them at all? And are there any last ideas or comments? Um, Including, is there anything that Turnitin.com as a software vendor should be doing better to improve their product? Because ultimately, not only would this hopefully be watched by academics throughout CUNY, but could be watched by others throughout the academic community in general. So, is there anything better that Turnitin can do? And should CUNY be dealing with Turnitin.com at all? And SafeAssign for that matter, both sides of it.
Am I first? I guess I'm first. To the second part first, should CUNY be dealing with these at all? I think I've made my position pretty clear. I would say no. It's a tool that the benefits that it provides can be accomplished in many other ways without the expense and without the risks of the negatives. I'll also say that I think what's really come out of this conversation, and it's been more of a conversation than a debate, I think, is that we have all of us, I think, a shared desire and a shared need to work with students on improving writing, on improving research skills, and that the university's real commitment, Leroy referred to it before, should be to providing resources that really help with that. So that may be more efficient and organized course management or assignment management tools. It certainly, absolutely would be smaller classes, more attention from more experienced writing teachers in all classes, more work with faculty on writing across the curriculum, more opportunities for faculty to become more familiar with the various models for licensing and intellectual property. It's really all speaks to the need for further education, both for students and faculty. And if we have classes that are too large for a professor to really see how students write and really get to know their skills in their writing, the answer there is to make the classes smaller and to dedicate the resources, again, as I said before, not to a technological solution to a pedagogical problem. Let's look for pedagogical solutions to the pedagogical problems.
Very well said. Thank you.
I would have to agree on that particular level, only because of the fact that as a university, we not only teach but we also learn. And to use the technology, what this technology does in many ways, just like Blackboard, just like online hybrid courses in the whole 9 yards, basically what this does is this increases student populations in a classroom, be it online or in an actual classroom. And I think that with lesser students in the classroom, this type of software in some instances may not be needed. I personally enjoy working one-on-one with students and even in groups, but I realize that in certain environments that becomes increasingly impossible. So if I'm teaching a class, how do I go about correcting 35 papers? Okay, and applications like this can assist, but I think here too, what I would like to see Turnitin do, besides coming to the university and speaking, say for example, with CUNY's legal department, is speaking with faculty, speaking with academic librarians whose concerns are valid concerns. There's the issue of intellectual property. There's the issue of academic freedom. Where is this a for-profit a venue here, or is this just another way of getting more students involved in, say, for example, the classroom? In other words, getting more students in the classroom and downloading all this. I see Turnitin as this humongous black hole that's got a gazillion papers out there, God knows from all over, and you're sitting up and you're wondering, so but what are they doing with all of this stuff here? And who's profiting from this? And better yet, with the amount of money that CUNY may or may not pay to get this particular license so that it goes entirely across the entire university, what better ways could we use this money to improve and engage our students in terms of their writing skills?
Thank you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Once again.
Well, I guess I'm the lone proponent here, but I would say that yes, Turnitin is a worthwhile investment college-wide. I think that, there's a number of utilities that it could help bolster in terms of classroom management. And I also think that in response to Adam's the second part of Adam's question, what could Turnitin do better? I think that it could really take a more proactive, student-centered approach. So as a student constructs a draft assignment and is ready to hit submit, there could be a pre-check in which the student can be alerted to issues of citation mishaps or questionable source attribution. And then from there, maybe build in some tools to add explanation or direct students to resources for which they could get additional help. And then I also think that the conversation needs to continue with faculty members and administrators for what uses would be most productive for us on this end of the table, and how to help students bolster their research skills and their integrity in assessing their own work prior to more of the policing function of the red mark graded version that we often see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Those added tool sets, though, increase the pricing across the FTEs. And that, I think, is an issue that Turnitin, I think, also needs to address, because they're looking at a product that they want to sell not nationally but globally.
Thank you. Well, to summarize, this has been somewhat between a debate and a friendly conversation about different viewpoints regarding the use of Turnitin.com, SafeAssign, and other academic integrity software solutions within the classroom. I think that there are no right answers, but hopefully we, together as academics, were able to explore the different sides of this issue. And hopefully this podcast, when it makes it out to the public, will help members of the public and members of the academic community decide if Turnitin.com is right for them and their institution. We will be setting up a blog page on the CUNY Academic Commons on the SKUNK Works group so that this conversation could continue. And on that blog page is also where this video will be posted. I would like to thank each and every member of the panel for joining us today. It's definitely not easy on such a rainy, dreary day to make your way to John Jay College to have this debate. And I want to thank members of John Jay College, including members of our video production team, part of the marketing and developing department, as well as members of my office who helped put this debate together. It is December of 2013, and we will only be able to find out where this issue goes in the future. But one thing is for sure, debates like this are necessary to help us make these decisions. Thank you for joining us, and have a good weekend.